Welcome back to the APF Records Podcast. I'm your host, James Kidd, former Widows guitarist and APF Records alumnus. I'm very much looking forward to getting this podcast and all the amazing bands on APF Records into your ears across the coming months of 2021 and beyond. Before I introduce our guest for the show, let's fill you in on what this podcast is all about. You're likely here because you're already in the know, but for those of you stumbling randomly across this podcast for the very first time, I'm going to help you out. APF Records is an independent record label based in Manchester in the north of England, housing some of the finest purveyors of heavy riffs in the UK underground sludge, doom, grind and stoner scenes, with over 50 releases from a roster of 30 bands including Battalions, Barbarian Hermit, Corrupt Moral Altar, Desert Storm, Pissed, Mastiff and Video Nasties. APF Records has quickly become a name to know if you like your riffs with some sizable balls. Each episode will feature guests from the APF roster who will have an upcoming release on the label, and we'll be talking about that release, life on the road, studio stories and how they're staying sane during the pandemic. Anyway, normally this would be the time where I introduce our bands, our band members, our special guests for the day. However, we've had a little bit of a hiatus and it is great to be back with a very, very special guest. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, our Lord and Saviour, head of APF Records himself, Mr. Andrew Field. It's a banger.
Oh dear.
I can't deny it. The Soviets know how to write an anthem. I'll give them that.
Oh my God.
Welcome to the show, mate. How are you?
Very good after that. Ridiculous build-up.
So awesome, right? Before we get into this properly, I just want to remind you all about our giveaway and tell you that because this is our very first special episode, we're doing a special giveaway, and it's going to be a super mega giveaway. Stay tuned to find out on what you could win and how you can win it, but it's going to be pretty spicy, isn't it?
I think it is.
Yeah, I think you'll find the level of spice is appropriate. So, running a record label, you've been at this a little while now. You've got your feet firmly under the table and got yourself a good reputation. But this isn't the first time you've had an involvement with the music industry or the music biz as such, is it? You've had other dealings in the past.
Yeah, I mean, you're on about EMI Records here, aren't you?
Astutely noticed.
Oh, my famous summer at APF Records. Yeah, I mean, when I graduated, when I left university, I got offered an internship in the press office at EMI in London. I'd got to know the guys there when I edited the college music paper up at Lancaster University.
Oh yeah.
And I went to London in the summer of 1995, young and idealistic, thinking that I'd be a big head honcho of a record label, and no, I was thrown into the most junior of roles in the press office. Looking back on it now, yeah, there was some good stuff that I did. You know, I worked with Black Sabbath because they were on IRS, which was an EMI subsidiary.
Yeah.
And I got to meet members of Pink Floyd.
Oh, nice.
Amusingly got to meet Cliff Richard. But my time there didn't last very long.
Yeah, it was just like an internship, wasn't it, or something like that?
Yeah, but then I upset Adamant, and
oh no way.
Yeah, that was the end of my time there.
Oh mate, tell me about that. Like, we'll do this off the record, because I drove Adamant on tour on his last tour just before Christmas 2019.
Yeah, you don't even need to edit this out of the podcast because I've spoken about it before. But Adam was doing his 1995 comeback. I can't remember what the album was called, and he phoned in to speak to the head of press, and I answered the phone. And I said, JF's just on the other line at the moment. Do you want me to get him to call you back? And Adam went, no, I'll hold. So I went, okay, then put him on hold. And I forgot he was there.
Oh, man.
And he sat there and sat there and sat there. And eventually, when I remembered, which was no exaggeration, about 25 minutes after I put him on hold,
Yeah.
I picked up the phone and went, I actually called him Mr. Ant. It's quite amusing. Mr. Ant, I'm so sorry. I completely forgot. I'll put you through now. JF's off the phone. And then about 10 minutes later, a colleague of mine at the time walked past my desk and said, dude, Adam's really not very happy. And you're going to get called in this afternoon to JF's office and you're gone. You're being sacked. Adam has said he doesn't want you working on his press anymore. So true story. At lunchtime, I said to my colleagues, right, I'm off to get a sandwich. And actually what I did was went back to the digs where I was staying in East London with a friend, packed my bag, and that afternoon caught a train back up to Manchester.
Oh, no.
And didn't say goodbye and didn't resign because I knew what was coming. And you know what? Never heard from anyone at EMI ever again.
Oh, well, look at you now.
So there we go. But you know, the link between EMI and now is simply when I left, I had that young idealistic thing of, I can do it so much better than they did. Yeah, corporate greedy PLC whores. I can do this.
Yeah.
And of course, when I started this in 2017, thinking, well, I know what I'm doing. I can release some albums. Oh my God! Within 2 months, I realised I didn't have a clue what I was doing.
Yeah, quite a learning curve, isn't it?
Yeah, but I've spent 4 years figuring it out, becoming reasonably all right at it. You know.
That's it. Yeah, if you haven't got a handle on it by now, it'd be a bad thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, growing up in the 80s, I know you had a deep love for the old school, and anyone who spent any time with you will know that you're a huge Rush fan, among others. But what was the band or bands that brought you into the world of heavier music, especially in terms of the sort of stuff you're dealing with APF?
Yeah, that would be really Caius. Yeah. So back in the late 80s, early 90s, I used to subscribe to Kerrang magazine. And for our younger listeners who won't know this, Kerrang back then was a Bible. It was the magazine that everybody bought.
Kerrang was the authority on everything heavy back in the day, man.
Correct, absolutely. And they had a writer called Morat. And basically, if Morat gave something a good review, I knew I was going to like it.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. And so Morat, God, I think it would have been late 80s, maybe early 90s. He gave 5Ks to Masters of Reality. Yeah. Which is an album that I bought. That was produced by Chris Goss. So then when a little while later, Morat gave Caius 5Ks in Kerrang. Chris Goss had produced it. I went and bought it, and that album was a game changer. Caius, Blues for the Red Sun, bought it on import, Tower Records in London, and it blew my face off.
100%, mate. It's an amazing album. I remember getting it because I think my first Caius was what was it? Yeah, my first Caius album was Circus Leaves Town. And maybe about a year later, I found, because this was still back in the early 2000s when Caius shit was still like a little bit hard to find. You know what I mean? It was still like you maybe had to get it ordered in or whatever. But I found a copy in like HMV in Hull and just bought it straight away for like some silly amount of money and was like, yes, sick. Put it on. Was like, oh, this is incredible. And remembered this was made in '92. Like how far ahead they seem to be.
Yeah, totally. And then I just became obsessed with John Garcia. Yep. So over the following years, when Caius called it a day, I was into Slow Burn. Then I was into Unida.
And Unida, yeah.
Yeah, and the link to the modern sort of, the stoner sludge doom scene now is when Spotify came along. I was an early subscriber to Spotify.
Yeah.
And when they brought in the function where if you're listening to Caius, it gave you recommendations on who else you might like. I discovered Trippy Wicked and the Cosmic Children of the Night in 2009, I think it was.
Yeah.
And that was another game changer. And being who I am, because I'm a bit of a fangirl,
yeah,
I reached out to Chris and Pete and Dickie and Trippy Wicked and got to know them. Introduced myself when they came to play in Manchester. Chris, the drummer, had his own record label called Super Hot, and he'd signed a band called Bong Cauldron, and he introduced me to them. And when I got to know Bong Cauldron, told me they were mates with lads in Pissed, so I got to know them. They were pals with Nomad. They were pals with Widows, and suddenly, I would say between 2010 and 2014, I got to know all of these UK sludge stoner doom bands. And I would say that of the 30 bands that are currently on this label, the majority I came across in that period.
Yeah. Oh, sweet. Yeah, because it all kind of seemed to kind of happen fairly quickly. I seem to remember from when getting in contact with Bon Cauldron and then them already having this kind of network of mates that played in great bands. It opens up that floodgate, those doors to you sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, as a newbie, as somebody who came across this scene, for want of a better term, what I figured out fairly quickly is if you knew 2 or 3 bands, they would introduce you to another 10.
Yeah, exactly.
And those bands would introduce you to another 30.
Like the exponential nature of it kind of thing. All of a sudden, you just got this fucking huge swamp of bands to check out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look at your band. Your band Widows that you were in. Yeah, I think I'm right in saying I discovered Widows first when you played at an all-dayer, maybe Riff Fest, where I was there and knew Nomad, and they introduced me to you.
Yeah, I mean, certainly since I started coming to Manchester to play shows, you've always been like a bit of a man about town on the scene, digging the bands, buying the merch, and generally being like a top lad. But what actually led you to start a record label?
Back in, so APF started 2017, but a year or two before that, common discussion that I used to have with bands that I dug, when I went to their merch tables, they had T-shirts, but they didn't necessarily have CDs or records. Yeah, and you just ask why, and it's like, well, first of all, no record label wants us, or maybe it was like, well, there aren't any record labels for us. It seemed to me that the only bands that had physical stuff to sell had funded it themselves.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, hold on a minute. I've got a bit of a business background. I'm into the bands. I know them all. Maybe I could release stuff for them.
Yeah.
And just from that idea, and as I said before, thinking that I knew what I was doing, which in hindsight I most certainly wasn't, I then told everybody, right, I'm starting a record label. Yep. And then it became a case of finding some bands, and you can imagine that bands were sort of partly like, oh, this is cool, Fieldy's could start a record label. Yeah. But then when they actually thought about it, it's like, hold a minute, this is a guy that is just a fan that we see at shows. He doesn't really know what he's doing. Why should we give him our album to release? And eventually I found a band who wanted me to release their album, which was Under.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think Under would probably say to you, the reason why I released their album was because they didn't have the money to get it manufactured themselves. So they had a fan there basically saying, I'll pay for it. They were like, great, Fieldy, you do that.
Yeah.
And from that little acorn, here we are 4 years later.
Awesome. Yeah, so Under were like the first guys that popped up. I remember playing with those guys in where was it? Some little like attic room in fucking Bristol somewhere. It was like quite a cool pub, but it was set into like a corner building. And, like Bristol has loads of very sharp corners, so it was literally a triangle. And then as you went up, the building got smaller. So you were just playing in this 3-sided room. It was fucking bizarre. So what's your favorite part about running a record label?
I'd say 2 things, right?
Yeah.
One is when a band sends me something and I listen to it and it blows my face off. And I think, oh my God, I have to have this band on the label.
Mm-hmm.
And then I feel physically sick at the thought of any other label releasing it. And I make an offer and they say yes. That is the best feeling.
Yeah,
Um,
that little victory rush.
yeah, absolutely. The second best thing, and I know it sounds really minor, but it is, if my phone pings and tells me that somebody has bought something from my record label,
Yeah.
I still love that. Yeah, I do. Because, in the modern era where streaming has really taken over and accounts for 80% or something of music consumption these days, the fact that people still want to invest in a record or a CD or a t-shirt or a digital download and are willing to put their money into that and give it to my label, I just think that's wonderful.
Yeah, it's an important endorsement, really, isn't it?
Mm.
Someone that could spend that sort of 10, 15, 20 quid on food or booze or fucking whatever, bills. And they went,
Yeah.
I want some riffs and I want Fieldy's riffs.
Yeah, and just on that last little bit, the Fieldy's riffs, if we say APF's riffs, there are a bunch of people who buy pretty much everything that I release. And I've spoken to many of them and asked, what it is. And they've said, well, we trust your music taste. We know that if you're releasing it, it's probably not going to be shit. And so I live for those people. Yeah, those that I reckon there's probably 50, 60, who will buy absolutely everything I release. And those guys who buy and girls who buy all of that stuff allow APF the freedom to be able to keep going and signing more people and investing more. And without them, without those people that buy everything, things may have been a little bit different. So I'm really grateful to them. I mean, I'm grateful to anyone who spends money on APF stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
But to those hardcore of people who buy everything, I am forever in their debt.
So with those two things in mind, what is your least favorite part of running a label, and is it paperwork?
It's packing up stuff.
Oh yeah, I bet.
Now, I don't mind, on a daily basis. Yeah, if I'm having to pack up 10, 20 items a day, mixture of vinyl, CDs, t-shirts, and what have you, that's fantastic. Yeah. But when I have a really big pre-order, it's a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, let's take Video Nasties, for example. Video Nasties Dominion album, which sold so many copies at pre-order stage, and half of me was so excited, messaging the band saying, oh my God, we've gone past our 200th pre-order, we've gone past our 300th pre-order, it's all fantastic. But then the day comes where I have to sit down and put 300 records into vinyl mailers, CD cases, t-shirt bundles, and I'm lucky that I've had help from Jane, who's also involved in APF on that. But there have been times where I've lost the will to live packing up.
Oh yeah, fully.
Yeah.
Fully. I've been there packing, like when we've had like a kind of huge, we had like a bit of a sale on Bandcamp for widows or something like that, and we've ended up having like a huge uptake, way more than we kind of expected. And I'm like, this is amazing. But now I've got to put like 6 tons of stuff into different envelopes, type in all the information on Royal Mail to get them all printed out, and then make sure they all go on the right ones.
Yeah. I mean, the irony being, once it's all packed up, taking it to the post office is one of my favorite parts of my day, because the postmaster near where I live, called Dipak, is just the world's nicest guy. Yeah. And he's the only post office dude I've ever known where if I walk in with 300 albums, he's like, oh, Andrew, this is wonderful.
Seems like a bit of a legend. He's had a bit of airtime on your social medias, hasn't he? I've seen his face a few times.
Yeah, he loves it. And we have banter. So like, I'll hand over these 300 items and he'll go, oh, that's going to cost 600 and something pounds. And I'll say, oh, I don't think so. I think it's going to be nearer 700 and something pounds. But, I love going to the post office.
Yeah, fair play. All right, sweet. So, all right. So I reckon it's time for a track now. You've selected a couple of choice cuts for us from the APF archives. So what's the first delight that you have in your record-shaped sac magique, and what made you choose this one for us?
Okie doke. Well, the first track that I've chosen is Home by Under. And I've chosen it because it was the first track released on APF Records back in 2017.
Awesome.
Can I just say before you play it, yeah, bloody love Under. They can do no wrong in my eyes. And what a track this is as well.
Awesome. Home by Under. Let's go. And we're back, and that was Under with Home, which was the very first track released on APF Records way back in March 2017. Now, at this point, normally I'd ask you, probably in a derpy voice, hey Fieldy, what shows have you got coming up where people can catch some APF bands and see what all the fuss is about? But, well, you know, obviously it's going to be hard to promote releases in the midst of a global pandemic where, you know, ain't nobody allowed out to go and have much fun, really. But especially, you know, this is kind of, it's double for a label, because not only have you got to promote just one band at a time, so quite often you've got to be promoting several, spinning several plates, that kind of thing. So how are you adapting to work around the lack of shows?
Do you know what? I think, like a lot of people, have just hunkered down. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's been interesting when I've spoken to loads of people about this pandemic is half of people have stopped buying new music, and if they do listen to music, it's all classics from their youth. or just something that makes them feel warm and fuzzy. But then there's also people that are probably buying twice as much new music as they used to, and are really taking time to discover new sounds. So in terms of how many records or downloads or CDs APF sells, it's actually stayed consistent, because while some people have stopped buying, maybe they've been furloughed or preferred not to spend their money, the other half have bought twice as much.
Yeah.
Yeah. So APF hasn't suffered really during the pandemic. Obviously, if there had been gigs, it would have been nice, because our band, could sell their wares at gigs and promote their stuff at shows and what have you.
That's it. The bands on APF are like live bands as well. That's their bread and butter.
Totally. Oh God, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and some of them are so monstrous live that it's really sad that they're not getting to play live. Can I pick on Beggar? Yeah.
Of course.
Beggar's album Compelled to Repeat is fantastic. It's a mind-blowing album, but you see those boys live and you'll never forget it.
Yeah.
They are a proper monstrously heavy rock band, with Charlie Davis just owning the stage as a frontman. And I desperately want people to see them live, just so that I can say, see what I mean? They're amazing, aren't they?
Yeah, because didn't they come on the label like fairly late on? They were quite like sort of. I seem to remember them being relatively recent in terms of kind of pandemic terms.
Totally. What happened with Beggar was, over a period of time, people in bands on APF kept saying to me, "You need to check these guys out," including, I believe, your good self, Mr. Kidd.
Quite possibly.
Yeah, Gaz from Bong Cauldron and some of the guys from Nomad and what have you. And in the end, it got to the point where it was like, well, I'm going to have to go and see these guys live. Well, it just so happened that I was at Bloodstock in 2019 and they were playing it.
Oh, yeah.
And so I hooked up with the lads from Barbarian Hermit. We went down to watch Beggar on the Jägermaster stage. And I knew within 10 minutes that I was watching something truly special.
Awesome.
And by the end of it, I turned to Adam from Barbarian Hermit, who stood next to me, and said, "I'm going to offer these guys. I want them on my label." And I told them after that show. In fact, I went up to Charlie from Beggar and I said, "So when am I releasing your album then?"
Nice.
Which probably made me sound like a twat, to be honest with you. But we talked a few days later, and I made the offer, and they signed.
I like a Bolshe intro like that. To be fair, like no dilly dallying, straight to business. All right, so taking a slightly different line now, let's talk signings. So from you going, yup, I want these lot, to the ink drying on the contract, who was your fastest signing to APF?
Without a shadow of a doubt, Gandalf the Green.
Yeah?
Yeah, Gandalf the Green. I got a message through Messenger, Facebook Messenger, from one of the lads in Gandalf the Green, who said, "We've recorded a new track. Yeah, and we're looking for a label to release it." And I remember reading the message and thinking, "Oh no, it's a track. I don't want to release tracks. I want to release albums and EPs." And Gandalf the Green, aren't they just some sort of, I don't know, some local, but I don't know. I didn't know much about them. Yeah. But I thought, I'd give it a spin. I noticed it was like 13 minutes long, I think, and thought,
Oof.
Yeah, okay. So anyway, but I pressed play, and I was floored by that track after the first spin. And then after 3 spins, I was totally convinced that I wanted them. And so I messaged them and said, "Don't sign to anyone else until you've spoken to me." And 2 hours after that, we'd done the deal.
Amazing. Fuck me.
So in an afternoon, James.
Yeah, that was rapid.
Yeah. And then we released the track a mere 2 weeks later. And what a great decision it was to sign them, because A, they're wonderful humans, B, incredibly talented. But that's a 13-minute one track, which is one of our most streamed releases. But also, I released it on CD, that one track on CD, and we sold all 100 CDs in like a week.
Fast.
Yeah. So every box ticked for me, really.
Yeah. 100%. So who's your most recent signing? Tell us about those.
Well, James, I can't tell you at the moment.
Really? Who's the most recent signing you can tell us about?
Yeah, first of all, let me just tell you that I have signed a band this week.
All right, okay.
And I'm very excited about that. And if people keep an eye on the APF Facebook page, around about when this podcast is released, they'll know about that. But who was the most recent? Probably Wall. Yeah.
Oh.
I mean, Wall was a no-brainer because it's Elliot and Ryan Cole, and those guys could fart in a bag, and I'd want to release it.
They can do no wrong, it seems.
They're just two seriously talented boys, and through my love of Desert Storm and the Grand Mal, they can't do any wrong. And when they said to me, "We've got this lockdown project, Wall, would you release it?" Before they'd even sent it to me, I knew it was going to be good. Yeah, I knew I was going to say yes, but then they sent it through, and it was really good.
They were our very first podcast guests, those guys.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think they are probably the most recent. I mean, I had a little bit of a signing spree in 2020. I signed War After War, which was Lewis from Nomad, Corky, and Jay ex Bon Cauldron, Indica Blues, who are definitely a case of why it's worth sending me submissions. Yeah, because they sent me their new album as soon as it was mastered, and I listened to it, loved it, and signed them. I really hope people listen to that album because it really is something a bit special. I release an awful lot of good albums, I think. I would say that. But Indica Blues is a proper spine chiller. I'm really happy with it.
The two tracks they submitted for the podcast that they came onto they were both huge. Like, I'll admit, like, I find Doom very hit and miss. It's either very good or it bores me to death. I find a lot of Doom stuff. And right from the off, like the little sample from the start of I think it was like a documentary about a nuclear explosion or something like that. Right from the off, I was like, yep, this immediately tickles my fancy. And then the guitar sound came in, and I was like, yes, we're in good territory here.
Yeah, but you've made a really good point there, right? There is an awful lot of what I call generic stoner, sludge, doom, psych, stuff that gets trotted out and I think gives the genre a bad name because it's just generic and dull and boring. And I see people online saying stoner doom is dead. And what I always say to them is, no, there are still some good, exciting, interesting, different bands in that genre, but you have to go looking for them.
Yeah, exactly.
And what I've tried to do is make sure they end up on APF. So, with Indica Blues, what makes them special is their songwriting. It's not just a bunch of riffs thrown together. Proper crafted songs. If you look at, say, Trevor's Head, Trevor's Head are British stoner psych doom with a real English feel to it, which is totally different, and no one else does anything like that, or if you look at Void Lurker, Void Lurker are no mere doom parody rip-off merchants. They've got a unique Birmingham sensibility about them. Look at me getting all passionate about stoner doom.
So I know several bands have scored major milestones whilst being part of APF Records, but what was your proudest moment as a label head?
Oh God. Oh man. What is my proudest moment as a label head?
Well, you saw one of your artists achieving a major milestone and you went, yes, my balls grew 3 sizes that day.
I would say there's been a few, APF bands playing major festivals is always a kick.
Massively.
So watching, I mean, I've been lucky in that quite a few APF bands have played Bloodstock in particular.
So I think 2015 you had 4 bands on the bill at Bloodstock, didn't you?
Yeah, and then in 2019 when Barbarian Hermit were the first band for the whole festival on the Thursday night in that big tent, or when Bon Cauldron tore it apart on the Saturday afternoon in the Sophie.
For the last show.
I mean, another one that I'll never forget was when the Hyena Kill played at Download.
Oh yeah.
and watching Lorna and Steve up on that stage playing to a couple of thousand people and owning it was a real kick. And I know they're all gig related, but I know Desert Fest didn't happen in 2020, but that lineup for 2020, which didn't happen, had more. APF had more bands on that festival than any other label.
Sweet.
I can't remember if it was 8 or 9, but I remember messaging the organizer Reese and saying, "Ha, this is amazing." And that was across all of the stages, the Roundhouse, the Black Heart, the big one.
Yeah.
APF owned that, so it's a bit gutting that it didn't happen.
Yeah, it's a shame, but 2022, we'll see it. I'm quite sure we'll see something for 2022. Fingers are fucking crossed anyway. Like, whether I'm working it or I'm there as a punter, like, I need another Desert Fest in my life. It's the only reason I like going to London.
Yeah. But I suspect that my proudest label moment is to come, I think.
All right, so it's time for another track. Tell the good people what you've chosen for us and what made you choose it.
Yeah, I've chosen a track called Trepanned Head Stares at the Sun by Beggar. And I've chosen it for one simple reason, which is that I think I've said before, I've released some really terrific albums, yeah? But when I'm asked which one song that you've released is your favourite, I have to pick Trepanned Head Stares at the Sun.
Cool. All right, let's have a listen. and this is the APF Records Podcast, and you are listening to a very special episode with APF Records founder, Mr. Andrew Field. That was Beggar with Trepanned Head Stares at the Sun, and we're going to get on to a few more questions about life in lockdown. So, on to the inevitable lockdown questions then. How have you been staying sane over lockdown? I know you're missing shows in particular, yeah, like we all are, but I know how much of a big deal shows are with you. But what non-musical shenanigans have you been up to keep things interesting for yourself?
Well, the honest answer to that is none, right?
Oh.
but how I've coped with lockdown, yeah, I live in a bungalow, yeah, and I have been working from home because I have a real job. Obviously, APF isn't my living.
Yeah.
And I get up and I do my job from home, and I do my record label from home, and then I might watch a film or something, yeah, and then I go to bed and I wake up and I do it the next day, and it's got a Groundhog Day monotony about it. But ironically, that that regularity of just doing that and nothing else, it gives me a kind of, it's a kind of safety blanket, you know.
Yeah.
And the highlight of my day is often going to see Dipak at the post office or going to the co-op to buy some food, you know. But I think music has kept me sane. Not just the stuff that I'm releasing, but my CD and album collection and Spotify. I mean, a lot of people slag Spotify off, but I'm a great fan of it because I discovered so much really cool new music on there, which I've then gone and bought to support the band.
Yeah.
I think I would say
it's a great advertising tool, but I think if you're hoping you're going to get rich off it, then you're going to get disappointed.
Oh God, tell me about it. I mean, James, look, APF releases have been streamed a million times on Spotify, yeah, and the record label in 4 years has made 4,000 quid out of it. 1 million streams, $4,000. You know what I mean? A record label like APF makes zero money in real terms out of streaming, but it's a great advert, and it's been great for me because I've discovered so many really cool bands through it, yeah. But going back to the pandemic, music has kept me sane without a shadow of a doubt.
So what have you been listening to during lockdown? Have you discovered any hidden gems?
You know, it's got nothing to do with sludge doom stoner at all, yeah. But I'd never listened to Joni Mitchell before this pandemic, yeah. And so I've completely embraced myself in her catalogue. And also the album that has absolutely blown my mind that I discovered during the pandemic is Black Star by David Bowie.
Oh yeah.
Never been a Bowie fan, knew the hits obviously,
of course.
but I discovered Black Star by accident, shuffling through Spotify, and that album's blown my face off. And during the really dark parts of this pandemic, that's been the one that I've listened to that has really soothed me and put a skip in my step, allowed me to go on to the next day.
Yeah, good old Bowie. Everyone loves a bit of Bowie. So what was the first record you ever owned, like that you bought with your own money and was like, yeah, this is mine?
Oh wow. Well, just before we answer that, the first album that I ever held in my hands that I remember being obsessed by was Out of the Blue by ELO, which my dad bought in 1977.
Fair.
First piece of vinyl I owned myself was a 7-inch by Junior. Mum used to say, I think it was called. Yeah. I bought that in 1982, something like that. The first album I ever bought was Go West. Can you believe that?
Go West?
Yes, 80s pop band. But if you want to know what...
Was that a band then? Because I remember it being a Pet Shop Boys tune.
No, Go West. Go West with these two dudes. Absolute chart fodder in the 80s.
Yeah.
You know, in the early 80s. But, you know... When I was in the early 80s, when I was 12, 13, I only listened to pop music. I didn't really get into rock until I was about 15, 16. And I can certainly tell you that the first rock album that I bought was Led Zeppelin 2.
Nice.
Yeah. That's the first. I remember distinctly.
That's a good foundation.
Yeah, man. It was, you know, and then obviously Rush happened in my life I discovered Rush in 1987, and that just changed everything. I went and bought their entire back catalogue in about a week.
Sweet. That's quite a fucking expenditure, especially back then.
Yeah, well, the great thing, I lived in London and we had second-hand record shops Yeah.
But they were
And, and
everywhere.
yeah, and back in the late 80s, Rush weren't actually that popular. They'd been really popular in the early 80s, but less popular. So you could still pick up their back catalogue for a couple of quid
Oh, wow.
in second-hand record shops in Notting Hill and places like that, you know.
Nice. All right, so leading on from that then, what do you think is the future for the music industry, especially your corner of it? How do you see things adapting to the challenges that we'll be seeing when live events come back, bearing in mind stuff like the losses of small venues, the inexorable march of internet platforms and streaming platforms, and shit like Brexit as well?
In my little corner of the world, I'm realistic, yeah, which is that people that tend to really like APF stuff, yeah, tend to be people that like to own it physically.
Yeah.
And so I'm lucky and I will concentrate on them. The bigger record industry is already totally dominated and focused around streaming. Yeah. And again, controversially, a lot of people get upset. Oh my God, streaming's ruining everything. But, you know, it's just change. You know, look at Netflix. You know, Netflix has changed. People don't bat an eyelid about paying £8 for Netflix and not going out and spending 15 quid a week on a Blu-ray.
Yeah.
And my view is you have to embrace change. Yeah, there's no point getting upset about it. In terms of venues, yeah, yes, a lot of venues are going to suffer and close. But whilst there are people who are passionate about music, yeah, venues will return in some form or another, even if they're shut. Because, I mean, you know this, James, having been in a band, that creative urge which you have to not just to write but to go out and perform, yeah, people are going to want to perform. People are going to want to go to shows, and so venues will be there in one shape or another by people who are facilitating putting those two things together, people that want to go to shows and people that want to perform.
Because I mean, I asked this question among others to everybody that comes on the podcast. By and large, the opinion is that DIY, as big as it's always been, is going to be like a much bigger part of things. A lot of that kind of like grassroots shit is in terms of like venues and, you know, some rehearsal spaces and stuff. They've closed. They've been, you know, they've either gone out of business or they've been, you know, bought out by developers and turned into flats or whatever. And you know, then you've got the pandemic that's come across and fucked a lot of stuff up as well. And DIY is going to, you know, DIY is always going to remain at the same level, kind of thing. There's just going to be more of it. You know, going to be more spaces that can be reclaimed for DIY stuff, like underground stuff, that kind of thing.
Yeah, people will always find a way. You know, when you look back at the history of not just popular music but popular culture, people always find a way.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. Like even when like, I don't know, you go to some shitty little town and you think, oh, there's nothing. There's always at least like a couple of bands, even if they're just playing in some like a village hall to 20 mates and it's an excuse to have a party.
Exactly.
You know.
Yeah. We'll survive.
People
You know, I remain firmly optimistic.
Fair play. All right, folks, we're getting to the end of this episode, so you know what that means. It's time for the giveaway. Now, remember I told you that because this is a special episode, we're doing an extra special super spicy giveaway. Well, this time round, the lucky winner will get a copy of everything that APF Records releases in 2021. So to enter the giveaway, go to our Facebook page at facebook.com/APFpod and choose the correct answer in the poll on the event page for this episode. The giveaway closes at 5 p.m. on the Sunday after the podcast has been uploaded, and the winner will be chosen at random. This one's a doozy, so get your ass over there right now for a chance to enter and win all of this stuff. So to enter the giveaway, just answer the following question. Who was the first band to be released on APF Records? Was it A, Pissed, B, Bomb Cauldron, or C, Under? Before we go, obviously the pandemic's kind of going to be affecting everybody's release schedule at the moment, but there's got to be some news that you've got for us coming out of APF HQ. Is there anything you can tell us about any of the bands, what they're up to?
I can tell you there is a new signing.
Awesome.
So more information on that very soon. Trevor's Head have been back in the studio recently putting some work into an EP, which we're going to release. Pissed are back in the studio in May.
Wicked.
and we're hoping to put a new album out by then, early in 2022. And then there are Wall, who you recently interviewed.
Yeah.
There's more Wall to come.
Oh, excellent.
That first EP, they've already got more tracks in the bag, so we're very excited about that. And Under are also in the studio at the moment. Well, I say at the moment, they were before lockdown.
Yeah.
Working on new stuff. So yeah, there's a lot brewing. You know, when you've got 30 bands on the label, it's never quiet.
Yeah, true. All right, so we're going to wind things up in a minute. But Fieldy, is there anything else that you want to tell us about before we go?
Oh, well, I think the only thing is I've mentioned a lot of APF bands during this chat, but I haven't mentioned the Brothers Keg, Possessor, Mastiff, Diesel King, Corrupt Moral Altar, Battalions, A Horse Called War, and Red Eye Revival. And so I just wanted to mention them so they don't feel left out.
Awesome. All sick bands. Make sure you check them all out, every single one of them. Right, well, that just leaves me to thank you, Andrew Field, for joining us today, and the listeners for listening. Be sure to check out the upcoming album releases that we've mentioned on the show today, and all the other bands on APF Records. You can find out everything there is to know about them at apfrecords.co.uk. You can buy their stuff in the shop, you can stream it from the APF Bandcamp, and you can buy stuff there too. I'll be back with another episode soon, and in the meantime, you can subscribe to this podcast on whatever platform you're using to listen to it on, so you can be notified when new episodes are up. You can follow us on Facebook at APF Pod, Instagram, YouTube, and all your favourite places. Follow the bands on Facebook and Insta, and if you're really struggling for content on your social feeds, you can follow my effects pedal building adventures, also on Instagram and Facebook at Fuzzbeard Industries.